Hello everyone, I am your host, sci-fi author Crystal Storm. Tonight, we welcome back to the show best-selling author Whitney Hill. Whitney is someone who lives their life loud and authentically. In part one of my interview with Whitney, we discussed her spirituality, witchcraft, and astrology practice. Tonight, we'll dive into Whitney's other passion, writing. She is the best-selling author of the Shadows of Otherside contemporary fantasy series, and she's an indie author. Whitney published the book through her publishing imprint, and she has been on the cover of Writer's Digest magazine. Let's take a deep dive into what it really means to be an indie author in today's landscape, why she chose to be an indie publisher, and what's next in her book series. Come, take a peek inside Crystal's imagination. Now that we're on the right channel, and if you're listening to this as a podcast, you have no idea what I'm talking about. That's why you should come hang out with us live, so you get all the whatever, Mercury's retrograde, I don't care. Welcome everybody to Crystal's Imagination Podcast, Episode 5. I am your host, sci-fi author Crystal Storm, and tonight I am joined by a very special guest, a woman who is my friend. I have claimed her. We're gonna collect her into our D&D group. We've just pulled Whitney into all the shenanigans. Whitney Hill. Whitney is a best-selling contemporary fantasy author. We had Whitney on the show before. We liked her so much that we invited her back. She is here to talk about living life authentically again. And Whitney is someone who absolutely does live her life authentically and loud, and I love that. When we had her on before, she talked about her spirituality and astrology and witchcraft, and it was just a really great, enlightening discussion. I highly encourage you guys to go back and listen to that archive. And tonight, we're going to talk with Whitney about her books. I have the first one. I feel like such a fangirl right now. It's awesome. That's the one that's coming out. If you're watching this on YouTube or watching it live, you can see us holding up book covers. If you listen to the podcast, you can't see it. See why you should watch? Whitney is a best-selling indie author. So tonight we're going to dive into that. We're going to dive into being an indie author and writing and publishing and, piss some people off and hopefully educate some people about, what the realities of it all are. So Whitney, welcome. Thanks for being back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. You're saying that you're claiming me as a friend. I'm claiming you. So, just so we're clear on how that works.
100%. I'm down with this. That is all. So, Whitney, let's jump right into your book series. Pitch the hell out of this. Let's talk about it because I'm not done with Elemental, but I am enjoying it. So let's don't yell at me. I'm not done yet. But I'm reading it. I got it.
No, so it's the first book is about this really sheltered supernatural private investigator. She's kind of been kept in a box her whole life. She doesn't really know much about herself, let alone anyone else. And one day, somebody that she knows is an enemy walks into her office and hires her. Not really realizing who or what she is or just anything about her. And she's got to take this case so that she can protect herself, and it leads her down this road to, discovering her own strength, discovering her own powers. And then over the course of the series, we see as she kind of develops into this badass where she was, initially very scared and not sure of her place and didn't really have anybody around her. We watch her kind of grow into that. And I like to think of it as like a growth journey. This is not, a story where somebody comes in and is kicking ass from, the first minute. They have their strengths, they think they know their strengths. But there's so much in all of us that we can grow into when we break out of our boxes, and I wanted to explore that.
That fits so much with the theme of the show too. So I absolutely love that. So let's talk about first, we last talked to you, we were talking about how you got into, your astrology and your witchcraft, and your spirituality and kind of, your journey and all of that. So where did writing fall into all of that? Did you start in grade school writing ridiculous stories like I did, or how did it evolve?
Yeah. So, I did actually start in grade school. I think a lot of writers have this story about, I started in childhood. I was writing since I was a child. Yeah. Also true for me. For me, it was a way to put myself in a story or see myself in a story where I wasn't represented. I was a big fantasy fan. I loved, we were talking on Twitter, Baldur's Gate 2 was
Whitney's also a big geek. Yeah.
I don't know how many hundreds of hours I played Baldur's Gate 2, and it was always frustrating to me that the only dark-skinned character I could play was a drow. who is quite literally, black skinned, not my brown.
Right.
And they're so frequently portrayed as evil.
Mm-hmm.
And, or if we turn to Star Wars, I was the biggest Star Wars geek as a fifth grader.
Yes,
When
yeah.
they released everything, and I can still read the alphabet and all that kind of geekery.
Love it. Love it.
But I never really saw black women in kind of leading roles in these kind of films. Lord of the Rings, no black women leading roles. So
Right.
writing fiction as a kid was a way for me to do that. And I do think you see kind of people taking two paths when they're marginalized creators. They either create with the majority group as the main
Mm-hmm.
character,
Mm-hmm.
or they create with themselves, somebody looking like themselves, somebody sharing their story. And I
Yeah.
was the latter because, like I said, I wanted to be the hero of a fantasy story. Um,
Yeah.
I stopped for a really long time because I got to high school and university and somehow thought that it wasn't a real job to write.
Did you have
So
one
I
of
went.
those moms? Did you have one of those moms? I don't want to call out moms because I know they can be so very supportive after the fact, but they always like that's a good idea, but
No, actually, no. My mom and my dad both have just been so supportive, like always. In
that's
do what
awesome.
you love, do what you're
Yeah.
passionate about. This was a thing that I did to myself,
Oh wow.
where I took in ideas about what was success and what did it look like and what was a successful person doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just completely turned away from anything creative, and it was, obviously a real shame because coming back to it like later, like what could I have done if I had been working in my craft in that time?
Right.
Um, but yeah, I went and pursued politics degree, a political science degree, and three business degrees, and then thought I was living my life, and then it all fell apart. And turned back to writing to process that, and kept going.
Yeah.
So yeah, childhood break, and then now.
Love it, love it. We were initially talking about doing this. You mentioned about how astrology played a little bit of a factor into you getting into writing. Please tell me that story because I've been dying to hear
So
it.
it got into me self-publishing, and I had been writing for about a year and a half by the time I should say I'd been writing this story. I'd been writing Elemental for about a year and a half at the time that I got my first astrology reading
Hmm.
with an amazing astrologer, Sam Reynolds. He's just fantastic. I've studied with him since. Um, but he was looking at my chart, and one of the things I'd asked him was like, "What the hell should I be doing with my life?"
Right,
Because I hated my day job, and I needed something else. I needed something that was for me.
right.
And one of the first things he said was, "Have you ever considered self-publishing?" And I was like, "Funny you should say that," because at the time I had been querying Elemental for 6 or 8 months, getting the usual, here's a like partial or full request, but agents were coming back on that and saying, "This is very well written, but we don't have a place for it."
Hmm.
And like, how many times can you hear that before saying, "Well, wait a minute, if it's well written, why isn't there a place for it?" And as a marketer, I know that there are reasons.
Hmm.
I may not agree with them.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. Don't worry.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into
But
that.
I started. I had already been thinking, what if I did this myself? I had written a novella that I just like, well, let's see what this self-published thing is.
Hmm.
And then Sam was like, yeah, have you thought about self-publishing? Because you got this and this and this. And I was like, well, yeah, let's lean into that.
Right,
And then
right.
I think it was a couple of weeks later, I got another no, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, let's just commit. Let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, definitely. Um, so you are a marketer. So I feel like you were coming at this from an angle that a lot of other authors don't. There has been, and it's slowly changing, but even I still see it kind of on Twitter because I feel like the majority of the writing community, I would say on Twitter, is looking for that agent. They're looking for that traditional publisher. So even as popular as being an indie author is becoming, a lot of authors are still choosing to go down that sort of traditional path. There seems to be, still that kind of, well, if you self-publish your book, it's not as good as, and it's
Mhm.
because you got rejected and that sort of thing. Did you go through any of that when you first released Elemental? Because Elemental did great. Actually, you
Yeah.
kind of hit it out of the park with that one.
Yeah. No, and thank you. Yeah, Elemental's fantastic. I'm really how that I did pass through a phase where I was like, oh my God, I've failed, because there's this thing where it's held up as traditional publishing is the holy grail. It's the only way to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I had been to Dragon Con in 2018 and like been to a panel that was all self-published, indie authors who were making a killing, like 10 grand a month, some of
Yeah.
them, on self-published books. So
Yeah.
I had at that point something to balance it out. I had seen people, discussing here's how you do it, or actually I'm more successful than I would have been or might have been as a traditionally published author.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there is just dealing with, I think, the external perception from that
Mm-hmm.
point on, which is the quality thing that you'd noted.
Right.
And we do unfortunately run into a lot of poor quality self-published books.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there are no poor quality traditionally published books. I've seen some that were not well written, not well edited.
50 Shades of Grey. Sorry.
Thank you, you said it.
It's trash.
Oh,
So trash.
I don't like calling out specific books, but
No, I'll call that one out on this show all fucking day. Fuck that novel. Fuck all of that. Fuck all of that nonsense.
that was the one that told me that honestly, it doesn't really matter how you publish. It's what goes into the publishing process and what goes into getting that book done. And if I'm somebody who I know is detail oriented, who I know gives a shit about what I'm producing, and like you said, I'm coming from a marketing background. I'm coming from this very corporate content production background.
Yeah.
I know how to evaluate things like covers and copy and just
Right.
all of that. So yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that definitely gave you a leg up that a lot of other indie authors don't have and have to learn. Like, myself included. Like I went into indie publishing because I'm a control freak. I'll just be straight up. Everything that I researched about traditional publishing said, even if I did get picked up, I'm still doing 90% of the work and they're taking some of my money. And I'm always like, but why though?
Yeah.
If I'm gonna do all the fucking work, then I'm gonna make all the fucking money plus my book my way. So I mean, and even then, like that's why I've hired you. There's still this huge hurdle that some people just don't have that marketing mindset, and it can be really hard for indie authors to find a marketer. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, because I find it really interesting that you got 2 rejections off your book, then you put it out into the market, you go bestseller.
Oh no, I got dozens of rejections.
Oh, it's my bad. Yeah, so you went through the whole author rejection process, right? But then you say, all right, fuck it, I'm going to do it my way. You put it out into the market, you find your audience, you go bestseller, you win a Writer's Digest award for it, you get put on the cover of Writer's Digest. So as a marketer, kind of, what does that say to you versus like how like traditional publishers look at things versus how maybe you looked at it?
Yeah.
Because you found that audience for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that I think gets to the heart of one of my biggest concerns or problems, I'll be honest, with traditional publishing is, if we look at the Lee and Lowe surveys, their diversity surveys, they've done, I think, 2 now, spaced 4 years apart. The publishing industry is very homogenous. It's very white, it's very cis, it's very abled, it's very straight. And there's just, when you're surrounding yourself, and this is something I learned as usually, in fact, I think always the only person of color in the marketing department or the only Black woman in the marketing department at every job, and I've been in 10 corporate jobs.
I'm so sorry.
When you're, yeah, well,
I've been in one and I was just like, can't do it.
That's what I kept jumping. But when you're constantly surrounded by only people like you, you think that those people are the only audience. And the number of just corporate publishing anything, if you're never getting these outside perspectives, if you're never getting diverse perspectives, if you're never, you're just not going to see it. And it's as simple as going to K-Lytics and saying, okay, what's selling? I was told, we don't want this book because it has vampires in it and vampires aren't selling. Well, 2 months after I got that feedback, they signed Stephanie Meyer's next vampire book, and I'm looking at K-Lytics. Vampires are a whole hot niche on K-Lytics.
Right. Vampires will never not be a hot niche. I don't give a shit. Like, come on! Like, come on. If there are certain tropes that everybody's gonna fucking read, if you put out a vampire story, you gotta really fucking suck for that not to sell.
Right? And that, and that's the thing. And I almost think it comes down to it's a money question. Mm-hmm. They don't see the money in it, or they don't see as much money, or they don't know how to position it to people who aren't like them. Yeah. And it's just like, well, wait a minute, I'm here on the ground. If yeah. I'm talking to all different kind of people. The book connects with all different kind of people. It's not just black people because there's a black girl on the cover. It's not just white people because it's fantasy. Whatever kind of strangeness is assumed. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, we were talking about breaking out of that box. That's how you have to be thinking in order to market a book. And for better or worse, from what I've seen, I don't have any traditional publishing experience, but from what I've seen, it just looks like publishing is slower than indie right now to do that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that kind of, I feel like your story is just one of many that I've kind of heard and seen when it comes to the success of indie published books that do find success. Is that, and I feel like a lot of entertainment markets have that problem because we see it in gaming, we see it in our entertainment as well. It's like all of a sudden the gatekeepers are just now, and this is so fucking ridiculous to me, that the gatekeepers are just now realizing, like, oh my God, we could put a woman in the lead role and women would go see the movie, or oh my God, we could have somebody but a white guy in this fucking movie and somebody would go. It's like they just didn't recognize that the whole other half of the population spent money. Well, and that just blows my mind.
So I don't know if you know, I used to work in video games, and I was kind of, again, the lone black woman. Mm-hmm. I was assigned the girl games. I was the one in the room saying, no, we should not have soccer players with, chest out to here, because they're not augmented porn stars.
Right.
They're soccer players. We're focusing on the athlete. We're focusing on the sport, not on how big their tits are.
Right.
So, and it's been a battle I've been watching develop for literally 10 years.
That's insane to me.
Just in my experience. So for them to still be coming to these realizations is just, y'all got to catch up sooner or later.
Yeah. And even from even you said, something that you said struck home. You mentioned, money, but then you mentioned them not knowing how to market it. And I feel like it's not a money thing. It's you don't know how to make the money off of it. You literally don't have anybody in the room that doesn't look like you to say, hey, there is money in this market. You could be making a ton of money off this other genre, author, whatever. You just don't know how to fucking do that, which is, it's 2021, and that is insane to me right now.
Yeah. Well, and they don't know how to make the money. They don't know how to reach out. If we look at Bookstagrammers, mm-hmm. I don't think I've seen any who are people of color with more than a few thousand followers. All of the ones who have the big follower counts mm-hmm. are white or white passing. Yeah. And when, and I know this from being a marketing director, when
Hang on, Whitney, I'm gonna pause you for just a second because you broke up for a second and I want to make sure we don't miss any of this good juju. Wait for your internet to come back. Okay, yes, please continue. There we go. Sorry about that. No worries.
So, yeah, if we're looking at Bookstagrammers and we're looking at the follower accounts.
Yeah.
Those with the bigger follower accounts do tend to be white or white passing.
Right.
I've worked with several, Instagrammers, Bookstagrammers who are people of color. They usually only have a few thousand followers. So if I'm a marketing director, and I have been a marketing director, and I'm looking at, value for money, my first thought is, oh, well, the people with more followers are the ones who are going to, get me more bang for my buck. Mm-hmm. What that's missing is if we're never, providing opportunities to these other people who are just as good but have never had opportunities, who've never received free book boxes, who have never received free promos to reach this new audience that we haven't tapped.
Right.
We get this never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
Self-perpetuating.
Yeah. It just feels like, I know that this is whole saying that if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I feel like we're, and I love that the conversation is slowly shifting, but it seems so fucking slow and just so fraught still with like this pushback. And I don't understand the pushback because diversifying this landscape only leads to more money. You find more creators, it's more entertainment value. It's literally this big win-win, but people fight it. And I don't understand that. Yeah. Whitney's internet is trashing. It's cracked, but she's at least frozen on a really amazing facial expression. Wait, now so it's fine. So it's totally fine that her internet froze for a second. Yes, you're back.
Like I said, Mercury retrograde. We got a crisis going on.
It's fine. It's crazy right now. Yeah, I'm surprised we're even live at all. So don't even worry about it.
So, I mean, there were two studies. I think there was one I saw today that was published 4 days ago. There's one that was published a few months ago. Racism is costing, at least the United States, billions per year. People will happily leave money on the table to be racist. These are academic studies. It is proven people would rather be racist than make money.
This is why the aliens won't fucking talk to us. This is fucking why. This is why they leave crop circles instead of send messages. This is because we are fucking dumb. But anyway, go ahead.
And that's what it comes down to. What do people want most? And I dare say it's not money. It's status and power and control over who gets to have money.
Yeah.
Who gets to tell the story. Because there's another stat out there. I think it's more than 50% of books about Black characters are not written by Black people. We're not able to tell our own stories. So confluence of money and representation and just flat out racism. And I'm not saying that is the only why certain people are in a room. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
There's an element of hard luck. There's an element of telling a good story that everyone has to do. Right. But I think we can't quite turn away from this idea. I mean, like I said, 2 studies just in the last few months showing that people are happy to do this.
That's just crazy. That's absolutely crazy for me. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to dive into what Whitney thinks that indie authors really need to start doing to really tap into this market of success and to be successful, and the level of quality that needs to be put out. We'll talk a lot about her imagination and her Elemental series, which is awesome. There's a lady in the chat named Shelly, Whitney, by the way, who read your book and said she loved it. Absolutely loved it.
You,
yeah, you got a fan in the chat. It's awesome. And so we're going to take this quick break. We'll be right back. Stand up, stretch, twerk, but not on Twitch. That's it. We're going on break. We're just going on break.
Finch without realizing who or what she is. Arden risks everything to claim her forbidden elemental magic. This hard-boiled private eye will have to save herself before she can save the world, even as the gods and her own community stand against her. Set in a supernatural North Carolina, Elemental is book 1 in a diverse new urban fantasy series. Kirkus Reviews called Elemental a genuine page-turner and gave the sequel, Eldritch Sparks, a starred review. Find Elemental at your favorite bookstore or save 10% when you buy directly from the author with code IMAGINATION10 at whrights.com/shop until July 31st, 2021.
Hey guys, this is Mikey Flash from Speed Force Music. Do you need custom music for your podcast, YouTube show, or any other project? Then look no further than Speed Force Music. We have a library of royalty-free music ready to go in your show right now. Or if you'd prefer, we can also custom craft music directly to your specifications. So for your next project, look no further than Speed Force Music. We are on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/speedforce-music. Or you can find us on YouTube under Speed Force Music. Let us custom craft a song directly for you.
Thank you for listening to Crystal's Imagination Podcast. If you want to listen to a podcast similar, let me recommend the Delvin Cox Experience, a podcast in which each week I'm on a one-man mission to unite our culture through diversity. Each episode, I interview a different guest, trying to find out what makes them tick. I've had guests on such as James Gabsey, Crystal Storm, and many others. So after you get through listening to all the Crystals podcasts, check out the Delvin Cox Experience anywhere you get podcasts. Peace.
Hello, Crystal's Imagination fans. Enjoy this sneak peek from the sci-fi novel Sonarchy, the Duology. The images crashed to the surface of Vasco's consciousness and brought with them the vortex of two powerful emotions. They welled up in his chest, slamming into his gut, his groin, a raging heat spreading through his limbs like a wildfire. Something else controlled it. Jealousy, lust. Something else surrounded the light and dark, using them as they were meant to. Vasco's vision narrowed in, showing him the inside of the back of the car. The transition of time revealed itself in clarity. Snow fell around them, lightly coating the private runway. Vasco heard her asking Stefano about his first wife. Then she said something Vasco knew Stefano never expected to hear. Even caught off guard, the response came naturally. Would you want to marry me one day? I already would. Then do it. Marry me. It was the one thing everyone envied yet never truly understood about those two. How they could possibly love one another so much. After a moment of lingering in the aftertaste, Vasco recoiled. Suddenly and violently, he was yanked from that memory and shoved into the next, some unseen force propelling him further into his mind. It grinded to a halt just as the jagged blade sliced open the skin on Stefano's back. Blood oozed from the wound, staining his dirty, sweat-laden flesh. His torturer picked up a bottle cap and shoved it into the open wound, twisting and digging the surprisingly ragged edges into the soft tissue. Vasco realized once more he'd slipped into the role of Stefano Terenzio, and he was both participant and viewer as Stefano's fists clenched and strained against the metal chains that kept him prisoner. Another cut, another shove, and it kept going until his entire back was aflame, his nerve endings writhing in agony as he struggled to bear it in silence. I hope you enjoyed this sneak peek of Sonarchy, the Duology. Fans of The Godfather and Stargate will enjoy this mobster versus alien sci-fi conspiracy thriller filled with secret societies and the metaphysical wonders that underpin our reality. Get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Scribd, or go right to the author's website, crystalsimagination.com/Sonarchy, the Duology. Again. What's up, you guys? We are back live with special guest Whitney Hill, author of Shadows of Otherside, a contemporary fantasy series. I am holding up book one. Whitney is holding up this. You can pre-order that right now. That's number four in the series that you can pre-order right now. Make sure you go to her website. Whitney, what's your website? Pimp your website.
WhitneyHillWrites.com.
Oh yeah. Okay. So let's Whitney, let's talk about what you think indie authors need to be doing right now to be successful. Because, and I bring this up too because there was a thread on Twitter, and I don't remember what author did this, but a pretty popular author on Twitter had a lot of followers, made the comment that when people are critiquing the publishing industry itself, people who chime in and say self-publishing, they're not helping the conversation. And I thought that was, and I felt like that was fair and not fair, but I get what she was saying. My concern was when I scrolled down and I read those comments of authors, it was a bunch of authors who didn't want to learn the business of being an author. And that's why they were going the traditional route. I don't want to know about marketing. I don't want to know about cover art. I don't want to know about anything. I just want to write the damn thing and send it to someone and collect a check. So us indie authors know what the life is like. And, people still have this idea, I think, that to be an indie author, you have to spend $1 bazillion. And I feel like, when the self-publishing movement first started, there was all these vanity presses that were just robbing people. So, what's the reality of it today?
So a few different things. I first want to back up and address this whole thing of the person saying like, oh, well, you should just self-publish. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of where we get that kind of quality issue is people dumping their quote unquote failed books into self-publishing. Mm-hmm. And let's be straight, like that was more or less what I did with Elemental. It didn't succeed being queried. So I was like, let me self-publish. The
Right.
difference there is the mindset. And I think you nailed it when you said it is a business. You know, I've got a triple master's in business management and marketing. And like, I came to it from that mindset, not from the mindset of, well, I don't know what else to do with it, so I'm just going to dump it into self-publish. Like, no. It was a
Right.
business decision, and I think that is the foundation of what anybody who wants to go into indie publishing needs to be doing, is thinking of this as a business.
And I want to pause right there before you go any deeper. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'll pause right there. Would you also say that traditional authors also need to have that mindset?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's kind of like a second part of that is, as soon as you decide you are going to sell your work as a creative, as a writer, as a content creator, whatever you're doing, you are a business person. Now, you can choose how much of that business you want to undertake yourself. You don't have to do all the accounting if you hire an accountant. You don't have to do all the marketing if you hire a marketer. You should have some kind of understanding of what the business is about, what your role in it is, how much you can do, how much you want to do, what you don't want to do, regardless of which path you're taking. Because as you so aptly pointed out at the beginning, you know, if you were going to have to do 90% of your own marketing as a traditionally published author anyway, you know, why not sell it? And that is the thing that we're finding, and it's the thing you find in threads by TradPub authors, where they're saying, like, yeah, you do have to do your own marketing now. It's not, you know, a default given that they're going to devote marketing dollars to you in any great amount. So yeah, to answer that question, absolutely, it's something that any author, anybody. So, and this is my personal take. A writer is somebody who is just writing and writing. You are a writer as soon as you sit down and write something. When you publish it, however you publish it, if you put it on AO3, it makes me sad to see people saying, I'm an aspiring writer. Like, no, honey, you're writing. You're a writer. Own it.
Yeah.
If you've published your fan fiction, you're an author. Like,
That's it. You did it. You did it. Congratulate yourself. Yeah.
It's when we take the step to seeing ourselves as business people that we can kind of become authorpreneurs, creativepreneurs, where we are our own self-published business. Because you're not an employee of the publishing house. You're not, like, you are providing work by contract.
Yes. And my mom is she's a big. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
People just need to understand that.
Yes, absolutely. My mom does contracts for a living, and so I came from a very corporate American business background. So I was reading an article about how Disney wasn't paying its authors anymore because any contracts that they picked up from Marvel, there's this whole problem with Disney not paying royalties. And I was reading the story of the guy who wrote the Star Wars books. And when he first got into this, he started with a small publisher, and there was nothing in his contracts about ebooks. But the small publisher was just like, I got you anyway, and they were giving him royalties. But then small publisher gets bought out by Del Rey. Del Rey looks at the contract and says, there's nothing in here about ebooks. So he stopped getting ebook royalties because there was nothing in the contract. And I'm just, and so that's what kind of terrified me about that thread was, you know, I mean, yes, there's so much work that indie authors have to do, but you traditionally published authors, you know, I put up a post about this, that when the moment that a contract gets dropped in front of you, you either need to become the most savvy business person in the room or get somebody that is. And you need to understand that your book is intellectual property. And I'll let you dive in on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and your agent should be helping you with that if you're traditionally published. If they're not, then they need to be to somebody who's a contract lawyer who can help you with that.
Absolutely.
That
just like,
yeah.
I was just like, oh God, I'm gonna throw up. You didn't what? There wasn't what? Like, yeah, Whitney. So now you talk about everything that you did business-wise to be, you know, like an indie published author, and you know, I feel like maybe talk a little bit about, like, you know, all your ideas for your work, because I feel like when authors sit down to write the book, they only think about the book and they don't realize what intellectual property is and everything they can do with it, especially if you're an indie author. Like, your hands aren't tied. You can take this as far as you want it to go.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite things in terms of, like, it's my IP, I'll do what I want. I've got a Patreon account. And I write fan fiction of my own books and I post it on.
I fucking love that.
We call it bonus content, and it is stuff that is canonical to the world. It's stuff that like, I was, fleshing it out either as a writing exercise to work through a writer's block or a plot twist. And it's just something, I think a lot of writers do it. We have something that we've either worked on or we cut it out of the story and set it aside. You can use that however you want. Mm-hmm. I use it, like I said, I make a PDF and I put it on Patreon. And then there's, right now I'm only publishing paperback and ebook, but I own the rights. So if I decide I want to make audio, I can do that. Right. There's just so much flexibility with how you can use your work and, what you can do with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you see that indie authors need to be doing right now to be competitive in the marketplace?
Building up their foundations. I see so many authors who just, and it's not even that, it's their fault, but they see people on Twitter, posting buy my book, but they haven't set up the foundation of, here's my website where you can find me. They haven't set up, maybe a shop for themselves. They have set up their brand. Who are you as an author? What are you offering? What is your promise to your readers that you will do consistently if they stick with you? Mm-hmm. I don't particularly think that people need to stick to a given genre. I think you can write whatever the hell you want, especially as an indie author. Mm-hmm. But you do need to clearly communicate what you are doing across all of your platforms, all of your work, all of like everything. Who are you in a package? And I think a lot of people who aren't marketers kind of look at marketing as something that's like you're selling out, or it's a thing that you have to do in order to book. And it's like, that's I really would like, yes, it can be very gross. It can be very gross. And I say that as a, like I said, as a career marketer, I know some of the truly kind of fucked up shit that, Google and all these advertisers are doing behind the scenes with your data. Mm-hmm. At the same time, people can't buy a book they haven't heard of. Yeah. And if you're trying to launch this marketing program off the back of either a shaky foundation or no foundation, no work on branding, no work on a website to serve as your hub, no work on figuring out the market. Like, what's the base word in marketing? The market. What product are you selling? Where are you placing it? How much does it cost? How are you going to promote it? Like, very basic things. Doing a SWOT. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you're not approaching the market as a business person, it's going to be so hard to launch something unless you get very lucky.
A lot of indie authors just turned off the podcast because they didn't want to hear that shit because they don't want to market.
It kind of breaks my heart in a way, because there are a lot of good authors out there who struggle to get seen, and it is disheartening. And I think especially when we see other people who maybe it seems like they've shot out of nowhere, I'd be willing to bet that those people did the foundational work. Right. It hasn't been out of nowhere. They've spent the last 2 years doing the foundational work before publishing anything. I mean, that's what I did. I started in 2018 with a website. Yeah. It's only now, Elemental is selling and bestseller and awards and da-da-da-da-da. That's on the back of years of work. The book started in writing 5 years ago, Right. So it's like, start now for where you want to be in 2 years.
Nice.
Or 5 years or longer. It's a long-term game. Everything about marketing is a long-term game. If you want it to be faster, you have to pay to play. So if you don't want to spend the money, you got to invest the time.
There you go. That's it. That's it right there. How would you suggest that, what are some recommendations that you would suggest for authors to kind of dip their toes in it? Because I know, if anybody's listening to this like me, you said all those things and your brain kind of just collapsed. You're like, I don't fucking know who my target audience is. Yeah, I could do a website, but like, what do you mean? It's a book. I don't know. It's a sci-fi book, so I should just target it to sci-fi readers. Like, what you talking about? Like, so let's, where can authors go that you would recommend? Because I mean, you could Google something, you can go to YouTube, you get it. Like, as a marketer, where could they go to get some solid information?
Yeah, so there's a website that Google puts out, trends.google.com.
Oh, hang on, you're breaking up again.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know, it's okay. Trends.google.com, and then the internet ate the rest.
So if you go there, you type in sci-fi books, you'll get, trends, anything like seasonality, countries where that's popular. So if you're trying to sell outside the United States, trying to globalize your audience, or if you're starting from outside the United States, give you an idea of where you could go. If you want to get really good like demographics information, this is where I'm like, you need your website and you got to have Google Analytics.
What I've been saying, what have I been telling y'all? Anybody who's followed me for fucking years, I've been screaming, authors, why'd your website suck? Authors, do you have a website? Hey, content creators, you got a fucking website? Everybody's like, no, okay, whatever. Whitney said it too. Okay, see.
Well, and that's and that's the thing. The website isn't just where your shop lives. It's not just where your blog lives. It's not just where you have a contact form for people to say, hey, I saw you on so and so podcast. Do you want to come on my podcast? It's where you can gather data about your audience. So I can pull up my analytics and say, oh, my audience is 80% women and 20%, 25 to 34. Presumably, the people following you on Twitter, unless you're doing, don't get
hang on,
lifts.
I'm gonna pause you just a second. I'm gonna pause you right after you say, wait, okay, presumably that's awesome. I'm gonna screenshot that one, by the way. That's a great freeze frame right there. At least the freeze frames aren't with you like looking like ridiculous. Like some of them are. Like this is another great one. You're just smiling. It's awesome.
That's right. Yeah, no. This is, I'm gonna kind of diverge a little bit.
Yeah.
And have a small rant on writers' lifts.
Absolutely.
These are the biggest gimmick, and they make me crazy. Like getting followers who aren't actually interested in what you do is not valuable. It's not. Aside from being annoying to other people who don't want to see writers' lists, whatever, all over the timeline, you're not finding people who would actually read your book. Right. You're driving down your engagement rate, which tells Twitter that your work isn't worth showing. Don't jump in the writers' lists. Please don't do it.
I feel like that's what. Oh, that's you know what? I was following that writing, and I don't want to bash it too much because I know that the writing community, tag and Twitter, like they found great camaraderie with each other and that. But you go to that, and that's all it fucking is. It's just writers' list. Let's do a writers thing, and I'm just like, there is no readers in that hashtag. Those aren't readers. Those are writers shouting out their book to other writers, which means no one is listening to you.
Yeah. And, some of those writers are also readers. You have some lovely, beautiful people in the community
Absolutely.
who are happy to support other indie writers by buying their books.
Yes.
So it's not, it's not a complete wash. However, you're screwing your analytics, you're screwing your engagement rate, and you're not actually speaking to the bulk of the people who will buy and read your book. So again, yes, we can try all these gimmicks and hacks and everything with marketing, but the best way to build it up long term is just to invest the time. It's to create good content. It's to, regularly promote things other than yourself. Sounds counterintuitive. Nobody wants to hear you shouting about yourself all the damn time. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
If you are shouting about yourself, it can't just be buy my book. It should also be, here's something useful for everyone else. Here's something entertaining. Here's something informative. How are we providing value to the people that we follow? Because timelines are monetized. This is monetized space. I don't automatically follow back. I don't automatically, engage with everything that's on my timeline because that's money. Yeah. That space is money. And when we're putting out, if you can shit post, if that's part of your brand, go for it. Right. I'm not going to sit here and tell people they can't shit post. I shit post all the time. But keep in mind who your audience is and whether you'll be able to use that information to inform your audience of who's buying your book.
Absolutely. This is such good info. Whitney, as a marketer, are you taking new clients?
I am. Yep.
Yep.
I have my consulting agency, which is Benu Media, BENU, and that's all over Twitter. That's Instagram. I've got a website. which is benumedia.com.
Yes. I can attest that Whitney is a phenomenal marketing mentor. She will, especially if your brain is like zoom, zoom, and you just got all the creative ideas and really all you want to do is just fucking write your book, but you know that you need to understand marketing, go see Whitney. Listen to Whitney. Do what Whitney tells you to do. Just do it. Just do what Whitney tells you to do. Whitney, let's talk about your book. Let's talk about this Elemental series where you started this idea from you just wanted to see someone that looked like you in a fantasy series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's dive into this. Like, why should all the people that are still listening that didn't just turn it off because they didn't want to, they were mad at you because you told them that they had to learn marketing. Let's talk about this book and this series.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, like I said, it's a journey. Somebody who is trying to get out of a bother. It's a journey for me as well, and I think the early drafts were very they were.
Wait, you're cutting off, and we're definitely gonna get that in. So hang on. So hang on. No, we're definitely gonna get that in because anytime an author talks about how bad their early drafts were, I have to. That's the best part. That shit's always fun. So hang on. The early drafts were. Go ahead again.
Shit. No, I mean, and it was. This is where I say, like, authors, regardless of how you're publishing, one of the things you really need is to know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a blog post about that, but there's kind of 3 different ways, and one of those is just who are you and where are you on your journey. So when I started writing Elemental, I was in a really fucking shitty place in my life. Everything had just fallen apart. I'd walked away from everything.
Yeah.
Gotten divorced, changed countries, living with my parents again. I had no job. I had changing careers. I was trying to retrain. Everything was wrong, and I felt like everything was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was reflected in the character.
Right.
All my editing.
So those first drafts were pretty much just therapy for you.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's really fine for authors to do. What I think is important is to find a good editor. So mine is Jenny Chappelle.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback was Arden needs more agency. She needs to decide what is happening, not just continually be pummeled by things, happening to her.
Right.
What does she do? When does she take charge? When does she decide, this is my motivation and this is why I'm doing something? And I don't think it was until I got that feedback that I had realized, oh wait, but that's how I feel about my own life as well. So, like I said, everything about writing, everything about this series, everything about, like I said, writing in general, is a journey, and understanding where you're at, and for me, processing things through that. I think throughout this series there's a lot of social justice themes that some reviewers have noticed and pointed out, and they get a little louder as the series goes on. So if that's not your thing, then maybe steer clear. If it is your thing, please read it. It's awesome. But
read it.
And I think that's one of the awesome things about being indie is, as so much was going on, in summer of 2020, and everybody was just finally waking up, I was able to weave this, some of these themes into the book and make it timely for where we are now. And I think, so just going on that journey.
I love it when authors get excited and talk about their worlds and their books. It makes me so, because I love doing that shit too. So it just makes me so fucking happy. Now, are you an organic writer or are you a plotter?
Both, and also a drunk writer.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote my first book high as hell. So I love that you're a drunk writer. So go ahead. I was like back in 2008. I wrote that shit so fast. The whole time, like hanging out my mouth, typing, like all fucking yeah. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll write an outline, and I just kind of do a typical, like, it's 4-act structure. I'll plot out points every 12.5% through the story. No more than 40% of the way through, that outline gets destroyed. I'll hit a point and go, this isn't anywhere where I thought it was going. This character's not doing this, and they're not doing that, and this is going to take way too much time to get there. we throw, and then it's just okay, wherever the hell we're going, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I'll put, reverse outline, which again is my editor Jenny Chappelle's like brilliant idea for people who like me just kind of lose themselves. Sometimes if I'm really, really stuck, we have a bottle of wine and figure out what's going on.
Red or white?
Red
or white?
Endorsing that. Depends on the season.
Love it. Okay. Now these outlines that you say that you start with and then you throw out halfway through, do you keep them and show them to like your Patreon fans? Please tell me you do.
No,
please tell me.
I do them all by hand. So I do my outlining by hand, and then
you need to scan them and make them a Patreon tier, so people can look at your outline and then read the book and go, well, that would have been interesting, and then completely judge you on it. It'd be hilarious. Just please do it. It'd be phenomenal.
I'll look at that. I'll see what they want.
Yeah. Do a poll. I know she's a marketer. She's got to do a control group first. Y'all know how that goes. So you have, and her camera is frozen again on another amazing screenshot, which is phenomenal. But now she's back. There's 4 books in this amazing series. The latest book is coming out when?
June 23rd.
June 23rd, and you can pre-order it now everywhere you can pre-order books?
Yep, everywhere, including indies. Please support indie bookstores. They really, really, really need it a lot more than Amazon.
Yes, I can't wait till I can just take my book off of Amazon. I am that fucking petty. I'm that petty person that I'm just waiting for the day that I can just take my books off of Amazon. They won't be on Amazon. It's going to be great. What's next for you, in the series? We were talking on break. You've got, I think there's another book after this, and there's more books. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so book 5 in the series is the last book that's planned, for now. I always leave myself an out. I'm aiming to get that out in October, so that'll be, everything's wrapped up. That should be the last book out this year. Then I've got a spin-off series, same world, different characters. Where it's going to be, a bit shorter, a bit faster. It's paranormal romance rather than urban fantasy, so it's spicier. And I'm kind of wondering how my dad's going to take that. My dad reads my books, and I'm like...
Hi, Dad!
If he reads that one.
Yeah.
Papa Hill might not be on board. But, and then I've got also a historical fantasy series that started. The first book is done and sitting in the ether.
I feel so bad right now that you have written all this and I'm still trying to write my 3rd book, so you're really making me feel like terrible as an author. How many words a day do you write, Whitney? Do you keep track like some other authors do? Because I really just want to continue to abuse myself mentally right now. I've got that Saturn.
Your Saturn will love this.
Yeah.
I track word count, and then I also track time. So I've got Toggle, which is where I just track generally, am I working on a book? And I use Forest app to say, what am I doing? Am I writing? Am I editing? Am I formatting? Am I proofreading? What am I doing? I can usually get 1,200 words an hour, and maybe max out at 4 to 6 hours a day.
We not having Whitney on the podcast no more. That's it. We not having her on this show no more.
That's not a sustastainable thing. Yeah. I'm gonna say that right now. As an indie author, you do need to publish fast. There's the thing with the algorithm where they're like, oh yeah, every 30
Discord is totally she's saying like amazing things, and then her internet connection cuts out. It's like, it's such a troll. God damn it, Mercury. Now you were saying that the algorithm
the algorithm wants you to have a book every 30 to 90 days, 30, 60 or 90 days.
That's crazy.
I can't do that. I publish a book every 4 months, and even that is punishingly fast.
Yeah,
that's
hard. Yeah, that's crazy.
And these books are all 85 to 102,000 words. Yeah. So it's, if you want to do, and honestly, that's part of the success, part of my success even as an indie, is punishing myself with this pace, to get these books out. The first book came out June 23rd, 2020. Book 4 coming out a year to the day.
Wow.
In a pandemic, I was working full time. So there was one point I was working 60 to 80 hours a week with my full-time job and the books.
That
And I'm
hustle.
not saying that to glorify it in any way. It's not healthy. I burned out. I had to step back from full-time work.
Yeah.
But this is a job. It's not
Yeah.
just a business, it's a job. And I know we all want to have fun with writing.
Mhm.
It's a job.
I feel like you can have fun at your job. That's what you need. Just try to have fun at this job of yeah. Let you know we're running out of time, but I can't leave without tackling this. Would you say that it's been a little bit more difficult for you to break out because you're a BIPOC author? Or would you say that not so much just because you had that really strong marketing background, so even though after those rejection letters you were like, screw this, I know what I'm doing, and then to kind of piggyback off that, what advice would you give to BIPOC authors like yourself who, I mean, just from looking the way that we do, automatically have another hurdle to jump over?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say that any part of succeeding or not succeeding was because of who I am as an author or, who's on the cover of my book. I'm a very data-driven person. I have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
I don't want to, denigrate another author who has worked, just as hard.
Absolutely.
That being said, we do keep hearing about, oh, it's hard to sell books with Black girls on the cover. I mean, there was a study out of the UK where I think somebody just flat out said, I can't sell a book with a Black girl on the cover. So it's like kind of anecdotally we hear these things and think that there might be something behind it. At the same time, like you said, I'm bringing marketing expertise to it. The book has had success across a wide range of people. It's not, like I said, it's not just Black folks reading it. It's also white folks. It's all kinds of people who are coming to this book and saying like, okay, yeah, this looks, wild. For people who are, marginalized, especially visibly, for whatever way, you really just got to trust yourself. I think a lot of us have had the message over our lives that something about our story is not worthwhile, or something about our story needs to be changed in order to be, palatable to people who will understand it. And I think the beautiful thing about publishing right now in this time is that we're seeing more and more people saying, no, I'm not going to italicize words in my language. I'm not going to explain this thing just very basically understood in my culture or among people like me so that other people can come through as voyeurs. If I've had to learn this other culture, they can do this, people who have traditionally been excluded, carving out this space and saying like, no, I'm telling my authentic story. And I think as long as you stick to who you are at your heart, your authentic story, and you're telling it in a way that feels right and feels real to you, you will find your audience. It might take some time, it might take some marketing, you'll find them.
I love that. I love that so much, and that is a perfect place to end tonight's episode. Whitney, please shout yourself out. Tell people where they can find your website and over on the social medias, and if they want to hire you as a marketer, which I highly recommend they do, let's shout that out again as well.
Sure. So my website is Whitney, WHITNEY, Hill, HILL, Writes, WRITES.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as Write, WRITE _wherever. WHEREVER. You're making me do all this spelling live.
You did really good. I'm not spell checking you. I swear.
And then if you are looking for creative coaching, marketing consulting, I am currently accepting a few more clients over at Benu Media. So that's BENU and then media.
There you go. Highly recommend it. Whitney, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being someone who lives their life so authentically and just being a wonderful voice for indie publishers out there and anybody who wants to try to break into the market. And hopefully, even if you want to go the traditional publishing route, you have learned something today from our talk. I am your host, Crystal Storm. I am a science fiction author. And I hope that you will join us next week right here for episode 6 of Crystal's Imagination podcast. We will be live. We will be talking to Jason from the Think Anonymous anonymous YouTube channel. He will be talking to us about crop circles and what's going on with this UAP movement, aka UFOs. I am so excited to talk to. I've been dying to talk to somebody who knows some stuff about crop circles, so I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. It's a big research topic for me. It features in Snarky Book 3 and some of the other upcoming Snarky novels. So we're gonna have a great talk. After that, we're gonna talk about the paranormal, and then after that, we're gonna have another gentleman on who's gonna dive into. He's a male witch. And his practice of witchcraft. He's written a ton of books about the craft and the practice, so I can't wait to talk to that. Awesome things coming up in June on Crystal's Imagination Podcast. Check out the archives at crystalsimagination.com/talk show. Make sure you're hanging out with us live over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Crystal's Imagination. You can find me on Twitter at WriterStreamer, on Instagram at Crystal's Imagination. The only reason it's not Crystal's Imagination on Twitter too is because Twitter has character limits. So let me say again, fuck you, Twitter, and your character limits. That's it. We're out. Good night, everybody. Well, hey, Crystal here. I wanted to thank you personally for joining us for this episode of Crystal's Imagination, the talk show. I hope you'll take a quick second to drop us a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and or a review. I would love to hear your feedback. If you have a guest suggestion, drop me a line at talkshow@crystalsimagination.com. Or you can just send me a note and we can be email buddies. Want more podcasts? You can also check out the serialized fiction podcast of the same name, Crystal's Imagination. You'll find it on my YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out all the information down in the description. Till next time.